Listen closely. When darkness wraps the world and dreams begin to stir, you've arrived at the right place. Welcome to Between Dreams and Shadows, the sanctuary of stories that live between sleep and the unknown. Here, every tale is more than a story. It's a portal to hidden worlds, forgotten secrets, whispers from beyond, and shadows that speak as your eyes begin to close. If you're drawn to mysteries, haunting legends, and stories that send shivers down your spine, this channel is your new nighttime ritual. Before we begin, I invite you to become part of this growing nightbound community. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale. New stories drop regularly, always under the veil of night. Like this video if you enjoy that chill before sleep. It helps this channel grow and lets me bring you deeper, darker stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange dream? Or felt something watching in the dark? Your experience might inspire the next tale. Now, take a deep breath, turn off the lights, leave the world behind, and get ready to drift. Between dreams and shadows, the night was unusually still. Not silent, there was always something humming in the dark, like the low, steady whir of the ceiling fan, slicing through the thick air, but still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The kind of night where shadows seem heavier, and time stretches, blurring the edge between waking and sleeping. The only light in the room came from the hallway, faint, golden glow seeping through the slightly ajar door, barely enough to touch the far wall. It was comforting, in a way, a fragile line between the known and the unknown. The bed sheets were warm, cocooning, pressing gently against the skin like a weight meant to protect, but something about that weight felt different tonight. Not protective, restrictive, like being held down by something unseen. The air had that quiet texture of a house at rest. No footsteps, no voices, only the rhythm of breath, slow and deep. And yet, just beneath it, something else pulsed. Not sound, not exactly, more like presence. That was the first thing. A presence. No footsteps, no movement, just awareness. The feeling of being observed from behind closed eyes, like something waiting in the corner of the room, just outside the limits of reason. It crept in subtly, with a chill that ran across the skin like an invisible draft, even though the windows were shut tight. He shifted slightly under the covers, convincing himself it was nothing, just his imagination, feeding off exhaustion. But then came the whisper, soft, invasive, intimate. Not a word, not at first, just the distinct sensation of sound brushing against the shell of his ear. As if someone leaned in far too close and exhaled his name with a breath colder than any open window could explain. Eli. His eyes opened instantly. No one was there. He laid still, paralyzed, not by fear, but by uncertainty. Had he been dreaming? Sleep paralysis? A hypnagogic hallucination? He'd read about those. The brain playing tricks as it drifts between consciousness and the realm beyond. But this, this didn't feel like a trick. This felt targeted, personal. Still, he laughed it off the next morning, told himself he needed to cut back on caffeine, get more rest, stop scrolling through horror forums before bed. Rational explanations were a comfort. They gave him the illusion of control. But rationality tends to dissolve in the dark, and when the sun fell again, when silence returned to reclaim the room, so did the voice. It never shouted, never screamed. Always a whisper. Always his name, Eli. Sometimes closer, sometimes behind him, sometimes above the bed, suspended in still air. The kind of whisper that feels like a memory pressing itself into the present. Like someone you forgot long ago trying to remind you they existed. Sleep became harder to find, and when it came, it was fractured, restless, stitched together by moments of panic and confusion. He began leaving the hallway light on brighter, playing music, white noise, but the voice would cut through it all, persistent, familiar, as if it had always known how to find him. He started writing it down, each occurrence, date, time, what the voice sounded like, where it seemed to come from. He looked for patterns, nothing obvious at first, but then, a rhythm. The whispers always came around 3:17 a.m., that specific. He Googled it. Biblical meanings, spiritual, symbols, psychological studies. But one result stood out: an article about a fire in a nearby town, years ago. A family trapped, a boy among them. His name, Elijah. His own name. A chill ran deeper this time, not just along the skin, but into something more fundamental. A sense that the voice wasn't just calling, it was connecting, reaching across time, or space, or memory, wanting something, warning, or invitation, driven by obsession, or fear. It was hard to tell which. He dug further. Old newspaper archives, library visits, online forums where people shared encounters with the unexplainable. And in one of those places, buried deep in a thread filled with trolls and skeptics, he found a comment. Just one, short, from a user with no profile picture, no name. He calls the ones who forgot him. A nonsensical sentence. Unless you've been hearing your name whispered in the dark. That night, he dreamt of smoke, walls bleeding heat, a boy with ash-covered skin, standing at the foot of the bed, eyes empty and mouth barely open. No sound, just the motion of breath and the word forming in silence. Eli. He woke up gasping, the whisper still echoing, even with his eyes open. The air was thick, humid, like after a storm, but the windows remained closed. Everything in the room looked normal, and yet nothing felt safe. He checked his phone. 3:17 a.m. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because something shifted after that. It wasn't just about fear anymore, it was about meaning. A transformation in how he saw his own existence. What if this wasn't haunting, but a message? A truth hidden behind layers of memory and denial? Could this voice be part of something he once knew? Something buried by years of distraction and noise? He started remembering details that shouldn't have been there. Dreams he thought he'd forgotten. A fire alarm going off in a childhood home. The sound of someone calling his name, but not his parents. Not anyone he recognized. Moments that had been stitched into the subconscious, like shadows behind a curtain, now slowly being pulled apart. There was a pattern, a pull, not just of sound, but of significance. He began noticing other things too. Birds watching from windowsills, street lamps flickering exactly when he passed. Static bursts on the radio at 3:17. Coincidences? Sure. But when you're listening for something, everything starts to sound like a signal. Or maybe it always was. One night, he couldn't take it anymore. He set up his phone to record audio throughout the night, placed right beside his bed. He didn't sleep, just laid there, waiting. At exactly 3:17, he heard it again. This time, closer than ever. The voice didn't just whisper, it breathed, as if it was inside his ear canal, crawling past bone and thought. He played the recording back the next morning, heart pounding. Static filled the first few hours, nothing unusual. And then, around the mark, there it was. Not just a whisper, not just his name, another voice, quieter, different tone. You know me. He dropped the phone. Comment down below. This feels too real to ignore. He didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid, but because something in that voice, you know me, struck deeper than fear. It sounded familiar, like an old lullaby hummed in a dream, like the echo of a forgotten promise. He tried to trace it again the next night, left the recorder on, sat in the dark, no distractions, no light, just silence, and the silence listened back. 3:17 a.m. came, but the voice didn't single quotes T. Instead, it thickened, like fog, but with weight, a heaviness that pressed on his chest. Not physical, emotional, grief. As if something in the room was mourning, he whispered, into the dark. "What do you want from me?" No answer. Only a sudden drop in temperature, like stepping into a place the sun had never touched. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember, to allow whatever it was to surface, unfiltered, unshielded. That's when the image came. A child, sitting in the corner of a burning room, face covered in soot, but the eyes impossibly empty, not scared, not angry, just forgotten, like someone who had waited too long to be remembered. And in that moment, it wasn't just the whisper that came back, it was the name, not his name, but the boy's, Malachi. And suddenly, everything collapsed. The dreams, the whispers, the fire, they weren't someone else's. They were his, fragmented, locked away, memories distorted by trauma, suppressed since childhood. He was the boy, or had been. The voice wasn't reaching out to him. It was him, a version of himself left behind, trapped in the smoke and ash of something he refused to face. That's why it always whispered his name, because deep down, it wasn't a ghost. It was the part of him that refused to be silenced, the part that remembered everything. And now, so did he. Do you ever wonder what pieces of yourself are still calling from the dark? And if you heard them, would you answer? That night was the last time he heard the voice. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes, silence is absence, and absence can be worse. He no longer felt watched. No cold breath, no whispers in the dark. Instead, he felt empty, as if something had been taken with the memory, like a hollow space carved out behind his ribs, where the voice used to live. Days passed, then weeks. The dreams stopped. So did the insomnia. But every now and then, around 3:17 a.m., he'd wake up anyway, not because he heard something, but because he didn't. That's how it lingers. Not as a sound, but as a void. Because once something like this finds you, truly finds you, you don't forget, even if you try. Especially if you try. You start noticing things you're not supposed to. Patterns, echoes, shadows that move slightly slower than they should. Mirrors that don't reflect quite right. People saying your name when you're alone, not in whispers anymore. Sometimes, in your own voice. That's the real fear, isn't it? Not the voice in the dark, but the day it starts sounding like you. So I'll ask again, when the night is quiet, when the light outside your room fades, and the silence thickens, will you listen? Or worse, will you answer? Asterisk, asterisk, and as you lie there tonight, eyes closed, blankets pulled just high enough to feel safe, your breathing slowing beneath the weight of sleep, just remember, sometimes the things we hear in the dark aren't trying to scare us. They're trying to return. To remind us of something we lost, something we buried, something waiting in the quiet corners of our mind. You might think it's just a dream, just a trick of the brain, a flicker of sound in the stillness. But then, just before sleep takes you, you hear it again. A breath, a whisper, your name, soft, familiar, close, and you know, you're not alone.